Hello, this is Dustin, and this will be a short video covering how to enter your first property into the new version, the 227 version of the Passive Portfolio Tracker spreadsheet. Very quickly, I would like to remind everyone, this spreadsheet is not a Lifestyles Unlimited tool. Please do not contact Lifestyles with any questions or concerns about this spreadsheet. This spreadsheet is developed and maintained by members for members. Lifestyles Unlimited has never reviewed the tracker for accuracy or any other functionality. We provide no warranty for this spreadsheet, and you assume full responsibility and risk for your use and interpretation of the data in this spreadsheet. If you have questions or comments about the spreadsheet, please email Nora and myself at tracker@sandust.com, and we will respond and get back. We always look forward to hearing from the users of the spreadsheet, and we really like talking with you guys. So feel free to contact us. If you are looking to get a copy of the spreadsheet, the easiest way to do that is send an email to tracker@sandust.com with the subject, please send passive tracker. That's all you need in the subject, nothing in the body of the email. Tracker@sandust.com, please send passive tracker, and that will send you the latest version of the spreadsheet. Now, going over how to enter our first property, the first place we're going to be working is on our Properties tab, tab number 1. But here on the Properties tab, we have a sample property already in there, so you can go through and look at what type of data belongs in each one of the cells. You'll notice that this property is highlighted in pink, and there is an X down here in the sold column. That tells us that this property is sold, and that is because we have sample data on the cell tab, tab number 6. So the first thing I'm actually going to do to make this easier for us is I'm going to go to tab number 6, the sale tab, and I'm going to remove our sold data from this property. If you want to see the sample sold data in the future, you can simply get a new version of the spreadsheet and see this here. It's pretty basic. We've got the price that the property was sold for, the date that the property was sold, how much you were distributed to you on your first proceeds. If you have a second proceeds, if there's more than that, I usually just add to one or the other. Let's say we have their main distribution number 1, and then we have a smaller distribution, and then 6 months later we have another smaller distribution to close out the bank accounts. I'd probably take those last two and add them together. They should be fairly small. Your first distribution should be the main one. Although you could do a 1031 exchange and have a small distribution up front and then not get the rest of your proceeds for 6 months because the 1031 fell through. Those 4 cells are the only places that you enter data here on the sold tab. So I'm quickly going to remove all of our sold stuff here. Now with that, we can go back to our tab number 1, properties, and our sample property is no longer highlighted in pink. This will make it easier for us to enter our first property. For this new property, I will be using a sample MFQA to get some of the data, so we can simply go through and put that information in. For educational purposes, I'm going to say that the name of the partnership, the LLC that owns this business that we have all invested into, is different from the name of the property. You will see why this is useful later in the spreadsheet. We are going to call this GA1 LLC. Now I will continue putting in the address, city and state, the lead's name, email address, phone number. For the lead's phone number, we only need to enter the digits, not any formatting. Now we have a new column, what deal number this is for the lead. Is this their first deal, their second deal, their 8th deal? We will say this is the lead's first deal. The lead override on the lead's first deal should be 5%. Also notice that these bright yellow cells, these are mandatory. You want to make sure you put information into these cells because we have formulas throughout the spreadsheet that reads the bright yellow cells. The lighter yellow cells that you have here are not mandatory. You could leave them blank. Purchase date, we are going to assume right now that this property has not closed yet, so we don't have a purchase date. I'm going to leave that blank. And notice, as soon as I get rid of the purchase date from the sample property, that cell turns kind of a light orange. The name of the property also turned light orange, and the invested amount turned orange. That is letting us know that we have not closed on this deal yet. This is very useful if you've got a deal you've subscribed for, but you haven't closed on. you know that that deal has not closed yet, or if you subscribed on a deal and you don't know that you've been accepted yet. You've put all the information in, but the lead hasn't told you officially you've been accepted in the deal hasn't closed. It's highlighted orange just to let you know that, hey, this is not a done deal yet. Until you put that purchase date in, it is not a done deal. We will go ahead for now and assume that the actual purchase date on this was December 5th of 2020. We'll keep this 48 units. That works for this deal. The year built, 1979. Yield value hybrid. You can leave this blank, or you can put this in if the lead told you what kind of deal it is. You have a good idea. I'm going to just leave this blank for now, but you can put whatever you want. That's just free text. Next, we enter the information about the purchase of the deal, our purchase price. Easiest place to get this in the beginning is from your MFQA, from your lead. Our purchase price would be the offer price. So we'll put in 1.8 million. The next is the loan amount. In the beginning, it is easiest to get that from the MFQA. Later on, your balance sheet will have a much better loan amount. So, but right now, from the MFQA down here, we will look at loan amount. And next, we will be looking at capital raise. In the beginning, the MFQA is the easiest place to find the capital raise. In the future, once the deal is closed, the Schedule A will give you the most accurate amount of information for your capital raise. Right now, we will look at total out of pocket to see what our capital raise is based on the MFQA. Next, we have our loan to value. This is a formula that will automatically generate based on the purchase price and the loan amount. If you know that there is a different loan to value, you can manually enter that in here. So you could overwrite the default 83% created by the formula. And let's say you know that our loan to value is 85%. I can type that in there, and it will turn that cell green. The green cell indicates that the formula is not being used and this has manually been edited. I don't want to use that 85. I'm going to stick with our default loan to value. As I undo that and put it back to the formula, it takes the green formatting away. The green box and green headers let you know. There are also lots of cells that if you put your mouse over, it will give you information about that cell. So if you see these little red triangles in the corner, you should be able to put your mouse over that and get some extra information. Next, we want to look at the number of investors in the deal. The most accurate version of this will come from your Schedule A when the deal finally closes. For now, we'll say there's going to be 12 investors in this deal. Next, we have our KP override. If you are a KP on a deal, you can put your percentage. With previous versions of the spreadsheet, you put yes or no. Now we track the percentage and update your shares of ownership based on your override. One thing to note on here is if you have less than 1%, you need to make sure you put 0.5 to get like a half a percent. If you had just put 0.5, it actually converts that to 50%. If you are not a KP on a deal, simply delete this. If this cell is blank, the spreadsheet knows that you are not the KP. If there is a number in here, it assumes you are a KP on the deal. The next column is going to be the name or entity of the ownership. So if you invested as yourself, as you and your spouse, as an LLC, as a family trust, you can put whatever that name is in here so that you know who owns this specific property. So I'm going to assume on this property, I own it by myself, not with my spouse. And the next column is amount invested, or cost basis. I'm going to assume I invested $50,000 into this deal. From here, we're starting to run off the end of our spreadsheet. There's a lot more columns going. So the easiest thing is if you look here at the top, you'll see these little lines with a minus at the end. If I go to this line right here and I click that minus, it will collapse from partnership name all the way over to the leads override. So it's going to collapse all this property and lead information and just get it out of my way. So now that is all collapsed. Right here, I can click this plus and it will expand back out. But with that collapsed, I can now see more information. We worked our way up to the amount invested, our cost basis, and now we can see we have more information here that we can work with. So this is a way to, if you have a smaller screen, if you're working on a laptop or a low resolution screen, you don't have a big 4K screen like I'm working on, you can collapse everything to make it more manageable. So after our amount invested, we have a new section in the spreadsheet now for cash calls. In this section, you put in the date of your cash call, you put in the amount you invested in the cash call, and you put in the total amount raised by the cash call. So in this situation here, the lead raised $100,000 with their cash call, and this investor, I put in $10,000 of that $100,000. This will then compensate for economic ownership and percent owned based on the new capital raise and the amount you invested. I'm going to assume that this deal right here that we're working on has no cash call, so we will leave this blank. These next sections in white, if there's white cells, you do not enter data. Those are all formulas and they are protected, so you will not be able to enter data. If you try to enter data into them, you will get an alert that this cell is protected. You can't do it. Only the light yellow and bright yellow cells can enter data. So here in column AC, you will see that we have the total amount invested in the deal, our all-in costs for this deal. This is how much money the deal has to make at the end. The Schedule A percent owned, our economic interest, subtracting out the override of the lead. If we had a cash call in this deal, this is where the cash call information would be shown, the adjustments in your Schedule A owned and economic interest. We also calculate out your price per door. And then the very last column here is a notes column you can use to just write in whatever notes you want to write about this deal. Assuming that this is a brand new property, your first investment, we are going to jump next to the MFQA tab, because we're assuming you don't have any quarterly distributions or financial reports yet, and you haven't sold or done anything with these properties. So the next place, after you've put in your property information on the Properties tab, even before the property is closed, you can come and use your MFQA data to enter data on the MFQA tab. To do this, we will scroll down in our MFQA, and we will be looking for gross rental income, net rental income, total net income, total expenses, net ROI to the passives, and cap rate for year 1, year 2, and year 3. So if we come down here, we've got our gross rental income column, year 1, year 2, year 3, our net rental income column, total net income, total expenses. We try to make it as simple as possible. Then we will scroll down a little bit. Net ROI to passives. So you want to make sure you get this after the leads override. And cap rate. We want to use the cap rate in here. One thing to note about cap rate, this lead uses the same cap rate straight across the board. So year 1, we have formulas in here that will automatically read the year 1 cap rate, because that is what we see most often, is that the lead uses the same cap rate across the board. If the lead changes the cap rate for year 2 and year 3, again, these are highlighted in green, so there's a formula, but you can click in here and manually edit that to put in the cap rate the lead is using. Once you do that, it will change the box to green to let you know that you are no longer using the formula, you are using a manually entered number. I will quickly go through and put in these numbers. And now we have finished entering all the MFQA data in here. This is the most tedious thing on the spreadsheet. But we use this MFQA data to see how your property is doing compared to what the lead was projecting before you purchased it. So it's good to enter this for all of your properties. But since it is not bright yellow, you'll notice it is not mandatory. You don't have to do this. You can completely skip this and only use the Properties tab and the Quarterly Distributions tab and get a lot out of this spreadsheet, ignoring all of the other tabs. So next, we will be jumping back to the tab number 2, the Quarterly Distributions tab. Here on the Quarterly Distributions tab, we have brought forward information, the name of the property. Actually, what we're showing here is the name of the LLC. When you get your checks, they won't be in the name of the property, they will be in the name of the LLC that owns the property. And that is why on the Properties tab, we entered the name of the property and the name of the LLC. If you want to see the name of the property, you can uncheck this box here, and we will see that the name of the property is Great Apartments. But when we get a check, it can be confusing. I get a check from GA1 LLC. So I can click that box and see, oh, GA1 LLC is Great Apartments. And here we also bring forward the amount invested, the purchase date, the number of years owned. The number of years owned here is based on how many distributions you've done, not based on the date on your computer. So as you see, we've got distributions going out to 2024. That is the reason the spreadsheet thinks this property is 3.5 years old. We also have the quarter that the property was sold would be in here. If there was a cash call event, that would be listed in here. The first full quarter that the deal was owned. Remember, we purchased this deal in December of 2020. So the Q1 of 2021 would be the first full quarter of ownership. Next, we can come over here to column M, and we have when the lead projects they will do their first distribution. We manually enter in what quarter the lead said, and this will track over here as Q4 of 2021 is when that fourth quarter is. The green box tells us the first full quarter of ownership. That is Q1 of 2021. So if you notice over here, Q1 2021 is our first full quarter. We assume that a deal won't have a distribution until the first full quarter. We purchased in Q4 of 2020. Very unlikely that we're going to have a distribution in Q4 of 2020 because we haven't owned it for a full quarter yet, although it does happen. Make sure your oldest deal is the first deal in your spreadsheet. If you've got multiple deals and you're just starting out, always make sure that your oldest deal is the first deal because everything keys off of this right here. The first full quarter of ownership is the oldest distribution we can put in the spreadsheet based on all the formulas we are using. So this deal right here, we are assuming that we're not getting distribution until quarter 4. So I'm going to say 0 for quarter 1, 0 for quarter 2, 0 for quarter 3, and then let's say in quarter 4 we actually got our first distribution. And let's say it was $850. So I just type in $850. And since we are currently in Q1 of 2022, it is not likely that we've gotten any distributions here. So I'm going to highlight all of these sample distributions, and I'm going to clear the contents. Right click, clear contents, and that will remove all of that data up here. If you do have more distributions, you can put all of the distributions you have for your property, just go back through your records and find all those and fill them all in. Another interesting section we have here is our column N. Column N allows me to say that this $850, the lead told me that check is coming, but I have not received it and deposited it. So what I want to do here, since I know I haven't received it and deposited this, if I put an X in this column, it will change that to orange. Orange letting me know that this is undeposited. I have one Q4 distribution that is undeposited, but I know the amount. If I prefer to work with this in a more positive manner, I could check this box up here, the green box, and this tells me that I've deposited the money. So now it's not showing anything in undeposited because that green is deposited. Nora prefers to work with this when she deposits a check, she puts an X in there and she fills this up with all of her deposited. I, on the other hand, prefer to only put an X on the ones that I know the money's coming, but I haven't deposited yet. And then once the money's in my account, I will simply delete that X. Going back over here, our first full quarter of ownership is going to be green. Our first expected quarter of distribution will be the blue box. Since we said Q4 here, that shows up blue. If we wanted to change this, we've got this pull down box here. We could say Q3. Now the blue box has moved to the third quarter of ownership, and we didn't get our distribution until the fourth quarter. We could put this back to the fourth quarter, and we can say that we got a distribution earlier. Maybe the lead was doing better than they expected, and we got $750 in the third quarter. So the colored boxes just let you know some information, but they do not limit you from putting distribution amounts in there. As you look at the data above your distributions, these show you how much you've invested in that quarter. You have your new investments, your total investments, your annual distributions, and your tax year annual distributions. Up here at the very top, you've got the quarters of ownership. So this just starts your first quarter of owning a property and counts down. And right below that looks at the 4 quarters of the calendar year. So we got lots of useful information on this tab. If you'll notice, there's some red triangles up here, so you can mouse over these triangles and it will give you some information about what those are. And if we go here to the select lead, we can click on this box. It will give us a pull down. And if we have lots of leads and you want to highlight one specific lead, you can click on that lead and it will highlight their properties if you have multiple properties from that lead, just to make it easier to enter information. To get rid of that highlighting, we go back and click on the select lead and it will blank it back out. Next is the quarterly distribution percent tab. There is no user entered data, so we will skip to the financials tab. Financials tab is the next tab we enter data on. Here on the financials tab, we will be entering data from our quarterly or monthly reports. Typically, I only do this with quarterly reports, but you can put in information from your monthly reports. However you choose to do it, you will be able to enter this. Now we'll be jumping from our MFQA to a quarterly report. This quarterly report is an August 21 report, and we have the month and the year to date. Those are going to be useful information that we need to know. The first column we have actually has a formula in it. It's green at the top, it's highlighted in green. This will automatically read what your loan balance is based on the Properties tab, or later on when we get to the Loans tab, if you enter new loan information in the Loans tab, we can pull in loan information from there. By default, we're just pulling the loan information off of the Properties tab. So we are showing that the balance sheet is the most accurate place to get your current loan information, and with the red box, we can mouse over that and it will tell us information about this. So if we go into our balance sheet, we'll scroll down. We see that our current loan balance, total mortgage debt service, is $2,146,400 for 2019. On your quarterly reports, this is going to be the most accurate, up-to-date loan balance you have. If you do have to pay off or something, this is where it comes from. And you'll notice that we have a primary and this property has refinanced, we have a secondary. Both of those combined together will give us our total. Notice that since I edited this from the formula, it's highlighted that cell in green like we've shown in the past. So it is no longer using the formula to automatically pull the data. I'm going to undo that and let it go back to automatically pulling the data. The next column we're going to be working on is our current debt service column. This is an annualized number, so make sure that whatever number you put in here is the annualized amount. There are 2 places I can get this. I can go to the P&L or I can get it off of our MFQA. For this one, I'm going to look at the MFQA, so I will scroll down to our debt service line. All we need to do is enter this number, and this is your annualized debt service from the MFQA. If you have a property with interest only, notice that you'll have a 0 here in your principal reduction. So just pay attention to whether the property has interest only or principal and interest. But the only line we need to enter is the debt service line from the MFQA. You could also go back to your P&L. Down in your non-operating expenses, you should have mortgage interest, loan information. You could add these numbers together. One thing to point out, on our P&L here, we have month to date, so we only have the monthly information, and we have the year to date. So this is T1 data, the month to month, and year to date would be T8. This is August, so this is the 8th month of the year. So we have T8 data. So you need to be able to compensate to make your monthly data times 12 or convert your T8 data into annualized 12-month data. Either way will work. Just make sure you know how you're doing it. For this right here, probably the easiest way would just to be able to take your 1-month data, add these 2 numbers together, and multiply by 12. The next section that we're going to be entering data here on our financials tab is what type of report was used. So this was August 2021, and we have a choice here. We can either use T1 data or T8 data. The T8 data is going to be more accurate than a T1. It's best to use T12 data. If the lead is providing you a T12, you want to use the full T12. If the lead is providing you a T3, or you just have the year to date and we're in the 8th month, this time right here we're going to be using T8 data. So now we want to go through our profit and loss, our P&L, And we want to look for gross rental income. For here on this property, we're going to be taking these two numbers and adding them together. It will take a little bit of reading your reports to figure out where your gross potential income is, but that is how much your property could make if everything was paid. Notice we did not use this total gross potential down here. That is lower than our $412,000 because we've got some bad debt, we've got vacancy. We're subtracting lots of numbers from the gross potential. Next, we will go to net rental income. This is our income after all of our concessions, bad debt write-offs, and including other income. So our total is going to be $379,061. Next, we are looking for total income. So we will scroll down to our total income for this 8-month period, $425,000. Next, we want our total expenses. So we'll go down to total operating expenses. Total operating expenses, $220,024. And next, we are moving on to stuff on our balance sheet. We want to see how much cash we have in the bank. We have a few different columns here. You don't have to use all three of these, but you can break this out however you feel comfortable doing it. As we scroll down to our balance sheet from our P&L, now we're on our balance sheet. We'll look at this. Usually it's the beginning of your balance sheet. Will tell you how much money you have in the bank. And this will take a little bit of figuring out how different leads track all of this information. You can have operations, reserves, security deposits don't come back to the property when the property sells. Those will go to the new owner. I've seen leads that have over $1 million here just sitting in the bank for emergency funds. So you need to figure out which one of these you should count or which ones you don't count. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to do this $209,485. These accounts receivable, I'm going to not use, just hit delete, and other assets, I'm going to hit delete. It adds these three numbers together. I just kind of put everything in total cash in the bank and use that number. You can break this out how you see fit. Next, you can use your rent roll to get your physical occupancy. We will just say that we're at 95%. And lastly, if for some reason the lead has told you that they are using a new cap rate, they are not using the cap rate they projected in the MFQA, you could put it in here. And mostly you should leave this column blank unless you have a really good reason for using a different cap rate than is on the MFQA tab. Here on the Financials tab, this section is where we put in all of our quarterly or monthly reports. Every quarter I come through and update this for all of my properties. This is then used to calculate out lots of information about the property across this tab. For the most part, this information is only useful when you're really trying to dig deep into a property. If the property is doing well, you're getting good distributions, you're not concerned about anything, going through all of the data on this Financials tab can just make your head spin. This is where you want to go when you get ready for the deep dive. You're trying to figure something out about the property and get a better understanding of how the property is actually doing. But from a day-to-day, monthly basis, you really don't need to spend a lot of time reading this Financials tab. All right, moving on to the next tab. We've already done our MFQA tab. There is no user enterable data on the Returns tab. So next we will jump to our Loans tab. Here on our Loans tab, we've brought forward lots of information from the Properties tab. We've got our initial loan amount from the Properties tab. On here, the user enterable data is right in here. For our initial loan data, we can put in from our MFQA or from other information from the lead. We can put in our interest rate, our amortization rate, years of IO, and when the balloon term is due. For this right here, we will say that our loan interest rate is 4.5. Our amortization rate is 25 years. We have 0 IO, and our balloon term is in 25 years. This next section here is for a refinance. If we have not done a refinance, we don't need this section, so we could highlight this and clear the contents. You can go through and just hit delete on all of these. I prefer to use clear contents so that it doesn't remove formulas and formatting and stuff. It's just a little bit safer way of doing this. So I'm going to assume that we have no refinance on this. If we did have a refinance, we put in the refinance date, the initial distribution to you, how much you got paid. If there was a second distribution coming, when you expect to get that money, how much you expect to get in your second distribution. And then we have new loan information here. The new loan amount. Is this a supplemental loan, or yes or no? If this is a supplemental loan, you put yes in here, and it will add our initial loan amount and the new loan amount together. So let's say we took out a supplemental loan for $500,000, then we would have close to a $2 million loan. But if we paid off the old loan, we would say no, and this is a brand new loan that could be $2 million. Our new interest rate, our new amortization terms, our new years of IO, and our balloon payment. You don't have to worry so much about these terms, but it's good to put in your distribution amounts, because we will use this distribution amount to calculate how much you got in your distributions. Again, notice across the top here, we can collapse information down. We have refinance stuff for up to 3 refinances. So you can go through, enter data for up to 3 refinances on a property if you've held it for a long time. Notice that refinance 2 and refinance number 3 have already been collapsed, so you will need to expand them out to get to that data. Moving on to the sale tab. We have briefly gone over the sale tab. If we have a sale, we can put in our sold price. We can put in the date of the sale, how much we got distributed to us from the first proceeds, and if there's going to be a second set of proceeds, we can put in a second set of proceeds amount. Then the tracker will take note of your distributions from the sale of the property to help calculate the returns on the property. Next is the Reports tab. Here on the Reports tab, there is no sample data, but you can say the pluses across the top. So we want to expand out our 2021 year. And you can go through for great apartments and mark down however you like to track, whether you've gotten monthly, quarterly reports, K1s, you've gotten some ideas up here. You can use this however you want. So for January, we can say we got our monthly report. February, we got a monthly report. March, we got a quarterly report and a K1. You can put more details in there. We really just kind of leave this for you to figure out how you want to put in your information to know that you've got monthly reports, quarterly reports, and K1s. It's definitely a good place to track when you've gotten your K1s. Moving on, the next tab is for links. Here on the links tab, we have a Google Maps link. You can click on this and it will take you to a Google Maps of the property. The rest of this tab is for putting in websites for the property, links to lead interviews. If the lead has a portal for this property, you can put in the URL of the portal. You can put your username here to help keep track of all your usernames, the password for that portal. Don't put the actual password, put a hint to the password. Lots of other information here if you want to just link to different things, different websites, Zoom presentation about the property and the password for the Zoom presentation. You can go through here and put all that information about the property. The last tab to have user enterable data is the schedule of real estate owned. Here on the schedule of real estate owned, most of the data is brought forward from the other tabs in the spreadsheet. The 2 areas where you can enter user data is the name of the lender and is it recourse or not. For the most part, if you're not a KP on a property, you don't need to worry too much about this tab. This is really for KPs to keep track of all of their KP information. It will also show you whether you are or are not a KP. This translates the percentage on the Properties tab to a yes or no on this tab. And that covers everything for entering your very first property on the spreadsheet.